was born in Long Beach, California. My father at the time was a naval officer on the USS Pennsylvania, which was anchored out in the roads off of Long Beach. I hung around with some of the other boys and we wandered around and might have seen a few girls here or there. Well, the water was pretty nice in those days. We had, in fact, one summer I remember getting in with one of the people that came down here in the summer. We had a trout line and we did a lot of crabbing. In those days you could get a bushel of crabs in a couple of hours, and we sold the crabs. That was one of the problems in sailing. You have a centerboard and a rudder, and we had so much grass that if you went in certain areas, you get the grass on the bottom of the sea would be all over your rudder, and you'd have to clean it off, or else you'd fall way behind in the race. I went to University of Maryland for 2 years in College Park, but that was my second year. It was 1942. Everybody was getting drafted, so if you didn't want to get drafted, you signed it up for some exotic thing like flying airplanes or that type of military. So I signed up. I took exams for both the Navy and the Army Air Corps, and luckily the Navy came through first. And I went in 1942, summer of 42, I went to pre-flight school and went through flight training. It took 9 months to go from nothing to getting my wings. That's how fast things went in those days. They were two-seat planes, basically, a training plane. The instructor sat in the back and you sat up front. But then the final plane there was the same one that I have that picture of, which was taken over Long Beach. But it was a OS-2U, which is a plane on floats that they used on battleships and cruisers. They catapulted them off, and then you land in the water and it's slick as the ship turns. The summer of 1943, went out to Long Beach to the Naval Air Station there, where it was sort of a inshore patrol squadron flying OS-2Us. Up and down the coast, basically training, and they kept sending new ensigns there who would then get sent to a squadron in the Pacific or the Aleutian Islands, where I was sent. And in December of 1943, I went to Kodiak and then out to Adak in Alaska, the Aleutian Islands. And from Adak, that's where the squadron was based. They sent me with a detachment of 4 planes in Kiska, which is one of the islands that the Japanese had invaded. But by the time I got out there, of course, they'd left. But I spent about 6 months out there, flying up and down around the other islands when the weather was good. The OS-2U is not an all-weather airplane. It was basically, we carried anti-submarine bombs and on the wings. That was basically patrolling around there. After that, I came back, was on the West Coast in some different photographic squadron where I would fly airplanes and take pictures of the bombing runs that the bombing squadrons and the fighter squadrons would do with the towed spars in the water. And we'd circle around and take pictures of the activities. I did that for about 6 or 8 months out of Monterey, and then they moved the squadron up to Moffett Field, which is down on the south end of the Bay Area where San Francisco and Oakland are located. I spent quite a while there, and then got orders to fly this new seaplane in Alameda, where the air station was. It was a seaplane more modern than the OS-2U, and at that time they sent me to, after training in it a while, sent a bunch of us down to Long Beach Harbor where the battleships were, and we were to make one catapult shot and one landing on the New Jersey, and the next day was supposed to be the Iowa, but I got orders to a school in St. Simon's Island, Georgia, a Navy school for Combat Information Center, which was doing the people that are in the ships will vector fighters into intercepts and so forth. And they're basically in charge of the radars on the ship. I was there for 6 months, and we did a lot of flying, air intercept, fly the airplanes themselves. We used fighter planes. We used the F-6F, which was had used extensively during the war. We flew that around on air intercept training. And the other part of the time we were on the other end vectoring the fighters around. That was an interesting time. Since I hadn't finished college, they sent me back they had a program called the 5-term program, where if you hadn't finished college, they'd send you back to college for a year or more. And so they sent me to George Washington, where I took a lot of the engineering courses I needed as a naval officer. And then the next year, they sent me to a Navy line school, which was in Newport, Rhode Island, which had a lot of the basic electricity, gunnery, and programs that you basically take at the Naval Academy. That was a nice tour. Going to school is always fun. But right at the end of that program, the Korean War started. So then they sent me back to Corpus Christi, Texas, for a refresher course in flying, and I flew the AD, which is a single-engine carrier plane, which could carry as many bombs or as much weight in bombs as a B-17. From there, I went to San Diego to a squadron which teams of 4 airplanes on each carrier that went out to the Pacific during the Korean War. And we did all the night flying and night bombing. They called us night hecklers. They sent us out either in the one day or for a 3-day period, you'd go out in the take off just before dark and come back in, have to make a night carrier landing, and which I never liked. But it was the better time when they shot you off at 3 in the morning and you came back in daylight. But anyway, I survived it. It was
What was it like?
they like landing on a carrier in the dark. Well, it was just as bad as landing in the day, but a little. You could see less, so we were lucky didn't lose any of our pilots. We had one of our pilots on the cruise had a bad catapult shot, and the plane went in the water up ahead of the ship. We had 2 crewmen who were in the back end, but they all managed to get out. Yes, I got married actually when I was just before I left for the Aleutian Islands.
Oh, okay.
In October of 1943. I married Frances Fisher, who was a local Severna Park girl who'd gone to high school with me. She was a year behind me, but at that time we thought it was a good idea to get married,
Was she your
which
high
we
school
did.
sweetheart?
Well, she had off and on, yes. Yes, off and on high school sweetheart. But it wasn't anything serious until during the war. I don't know, things seemed different, and people got married. We had 4 children. When I got orders to a Glenview, Illinois Naval Air Station, which is just north of Chicago, and we were there for a few years. I was an instructor at the CIC school, which involved, again, that's where I learned how to fly jets. We had some of the early jet aircraft, and McDonnell's early airplane, the Grumman early fighters, not as exotic as the ones you see these days, but they were jets, which was fun to fly. And I also got to fly the F-8F Cougar, which was the last, it was built by Grumman, but it was something like the F-6F, only a much smaller and a more powerful engine on it. It was quite a nice plane. From there, I got orders to a staff job in Quonset Point, Rhode Island, where I was on the staff of Command of Fleet Air Quonset, which took all the air activities in the northeastern part of the country. Was there for 3 years, and then got orders to the Navy Department, where it was called the Bureau of Naval Aeronautics at that time. Later on, it was changed to the Air Systems Command. But I had a job in there as running a department that was responsible for buying the ground support equipment for airplanes. It was in downtown Washington. In fact, it was in the down where the reflecting pool is. They had these old buildings that had been built in World War I, where the Navy, where the Bureau of Air was, and so at that time we decided to live in Annapolis and commuted there, and we bought a house in Annapolis and commuted. After that tour, we went to a tour on a ship in the Pacific again in San Diego, the USS Yorktown, which was as a CIC officer, the Combat Information Center, where all the radars and air control systems are. And we took a cruise to the Pacific, where Japan and Hong Kong, of course, which is always nice to visit.
Pacific.
I was on the Yorktown,
Right.
and we also, one of the interesting things, we went out on one trip to the Johnson Islands when they were having one of the last atomic bomb tests, and we were in that area supporting it. Interesting. We didn't get close enough to get any radiation out of it. Oh no, my family stayed in Long Beach. We had a house in Seal Beach, which is just north of Long Beach, along the coast, and nice spot. And at that time, Linda, my oldest daughter, Linda, went to Huntington Beach for high school. They didn't have one in there. And she did a lot of surfing and California living. But she was in high school there. And then when I got off the ship after 2 years, I was sent to another staff in San Diego. And we lived there in Coronado, which is very nice living. Del Coronado Hotel is close by, and we enjoyed it there.
So when did you actually...
After that, we came back to Annapolis and rented a house for a while. And then we finally found that lot on the Severn down there in Annapolis in Wardour, where we built our house. Cost $37,500 for the house, and we bought the lot for $8,950. The lot on the water in Annapolis. Incredible. Oh, it changed a lot. I mean, it got much larger. And of course, Serena Park had changed a lot. At one stage, I was a Commodore for a few years. There were about 350 members, I think. And it stays around that number. It's basically all they have. It's a club for small boat sailing. Most of or practically all the boats are kept on trailers on the property. I first owned an International 14, which they had a lot of them at that time, when I first came back to Annapolis. And it was a 14-foot boat, but had a lot of sail on it, and quite a challenge to sail, but I enjoyed it. We had a good fleet of them there at the club. Later on, I sailed what's called the Snipe class, which is pretty well a world-class boat. You find them in South America, Argentina, Brazil, and Chile, and other South American countries, Europe, Spain, Portugal, Italy, and even in Britain a few. But they have world championships, and so it gives you an opportunity to sail with other boats. And there were, at one time, there were, I guess 30, 40, 50 fleets in the United States. Over the years, it's dropped somewhat, fewer boats, but the fleet in Annapolis is still quite strong and has a lot of, they just recently ran the national championship for this country, and we had 50-some boats there. Yeah, I think I may have overemphasized sailing when my children were young, because two of them had quite active sailing careers. My youngest son, Jonathan, has worked for North Sails. I think it's the only real job after school that he ever had, and he's now running the division in Annapolis. But it's the largest sailmaker in the world. They have offices all over the world. Linda, my daughter, was more into big boat sailing, and she did a lot of sailing down in the islands, taking, at one stage she was the captain of a 36-foot boat. I guess it was a 45-foot boat that she took down to the Caribbean during the winter time for 3 or 4 years. maybe longer. But she did some racing, and even when they had a America's Cup boat, she was on the team that tried out when they had a women's team. I stayed in the Navy for 25 years. I think it was 1967 that I retired. It was a good career, and I enjoyed it because I had a chance to fly different airplanes, and then I went into the insurance business and sold insurance. But I did that because it was one of the few jobs that seemed to be, you didn't have to work on weekends, so I could go sailing. A lot of the Navy people retire or go into the airlines. Was an opportunity I could have had, but I'm glad I didn't do it. My first, yes. Well, that was sort of a unusual circumstances. My first wife passed away, and after some time, in that same, I guess, 6 months after that, my mother had passed away 4 or 5 years before that, and then my father passed away. So at that time, I didn't have a wife or any responsibility to watch out for him. So I started looking around for some companion, and ran into Mary Ellen, and that was almost 33 years ago. In fact, it was about 33 years ago in about the 28th of August, so it's pretty close to that. 33 years exactly right now.
So that was your first date? Was that
Right, yeah, we had a few dates, and it seemed to work, so we had a few more dates. First thing you know, we were married, and it's been a great 33 years, fantastic. So I had to move she didn't want to live in Annapolis, in my house. She wanted to live here, and so we did that, and I'm still here. And she's still here, enjoying a nice location. Well, most of the houses over on the Magathie were summer houses, and of course the places like Berrywood and weren't even here. They were just woods. Nobody lived there. And out here on South Drive where we are, there were a lot of homes. There were a few people that lived here year round, but very few. There used to be early when I was young, I remember coming to a Center Road or Center Street, which used to run through the middle of between North and South Drive. It's now closed up, but there was a bar in there, and even though you weren't 21, you could buy a beer, and I remember coming over there a few times. It was an interesting group. The Severn, the Magathie has, I think, is lower, doesn't have the high bluffs that you have on the Severn, and Severn's sort of a straight. It has a big big area, round bay, which is a sort of like a lake, and then it narrows down as you go down. But the Magathie has a lot more creeks on it, and the houses, most of them, except for this area, are fairly low to the water. But nowadays, they're both very nice communities. They're both, I guess, great places to live. I know people seem to want to move to Severna Park for the schools and for whatever, but it's a great place to live. And I've certainly loved living on the Magathie as well as the Severn. Certainly, we've gone backwards. We were never, I don't know what's going to happen. there's no place for the crabs to live, and we need underwater grasses badly. Well, at 99, I don't have many words of wisdom. I think I've been lucky to live this long and still be healthy. But I think maybe part of it is because I have a real even temper and don't get upset when things don't go wrong or go wrong. And I try to keep things tame. And I think that may have been my mother's training. She was always very calm about things.